Okay. In this paper, the paper is entitled Estimating the Economic Effects of Capital on Sectoral Production in Greece and the Need to Think of New Production Paradigms. The paper empirically estimates the impact of 9 types of man-made capital on sectoral production in Greece from 2010 to 2018. Man-made capital is involves the transport equipment, computer software, buildings, structures, and so on. We picked 2010. It's a year during which the government took the first austerity measures to cope with the sovereign debt crisis of 2009, and the break in the time series prevents us from going to earlier years. 2018 is the last year for which data on capital existed at the time of carrying out the analysis. It was a pre-pandemic year of economic expansion. Several comparisons will be made based on 2018. The aim is to contribute to discussion regarding the country's recovery and resilience prioritization choices by looking into how investments might perform across sectors and supplying a plausible baseline against which planning discussions may be carried out. Following an identifiable strand in the literature, the paper adopts a 2-step econometric analysis. The impact of the aggregate measures of annual labor and annual capital on output is estimated at the sectoral level for 62 sectors, 62 economic activities. Examples of this, for instance, the first activity is crop and animal production, hunting, and related services activities. The second activity is forestry and logging, and so on. These are pretty much standardized. The individual effects of the various types of inputs on the residual of the previous process, the so-called multi-factor productivity, is also estimated. The data on output, labor, and capital, as well as on the 9 types of capital that we're going to consider, are all provided by Eurostat. The data is freely accessible to everybody. The objective is to measure the overall impact on output of a marginal change in the value of each and every type of capital. To that end, we use a translog production function. The particular function is much more flexible than the usual counterparts like the Cobb-Douglas or the CC, the constant elasticity of substitution. It involves an autonomous component, labor and capital, their squares, their product, a number of time data, involve the trend and shocks, as well as cross-sectoral effects, like the impact of labor of one sector on the output of another sector. To address concerns expressed in cases of forecast, this is reformulated in terms of first differences from one year to the next. We do a number of tests in order to consider things that are usually worry statisticians in such analysis, and we can proceed. The sectoral multi-factor productivity is the portion of the production that's attributed to the components in red, like the error term and the time trends or the shocks, after we have isolated the impact of labor and capital. This sectoral multi-factor productivity is empirically explained in terms of 9 types of capital and 6 types of labor. This is the expression that we use. And the 6 types of labor relate to people's highest formal educational attainment. The analysis is carried with robust standard errors to address heterogeneity and normality issues. As I said, we run this in 2 steps. in the first step, we analyzed output. In the second step, we analyze the residual of output, what is left from the first step, the so-called multi-factor productivity. We have 496 observations to preserve degrees of freedom. Variables with explanatory variables with similar coefficients are amalgamated. So the regression to observation ratio comes to 28% in the first step and 23% in the second step. We have a good model of fitness, 96 or 98%. And according to the Ramsey criterion, we have no specification. The residuals of both expressions are entirely uncorrelated with each and every regression employed. Let's look at the findings. We consider the impact of capital in each sector, and there are cases where the coefficient is negative. That means that any marginal increase in capital has a negative effect on output. There are cases, of course, we have positive effects. The number in red is the p-value. This is something. This is something that statisticians look at. However, this is the only case where the p-value is not zero. It's 0.18, but it is not very important in our case because we carry out the analysis in terms of the population, not in a sample. So there is no need for a comparison of that sort. We cannot test the significance in the population, the samples with the population, because we work with the population. We look at capital squared. Again, we find negative and positive terms. And when we combine them, we see that in several cases, we have production functions featuring a point beyond which the additional input becomes inefficient and unproductive. This is something well known in the literature and observed in several industries and several countries. So it's conceivable that several sectors in Greece operate or may be close to operating in this manner, that is, being inefficient. We look at the coefficients of the product terms. Again, with negative effects, positive effects, and then we go to the multi-factor productivity. Here, we've noticed that the shares of the various types of capital are associated with negative and positive terms. We go very quickly to put them all together in one diagram. And after we combine these coefficients and we take the capital that we had in each sector in 2018, we consider the experiment of adding €1,000 on top of the existing capital. Add it on dwellings, on other building structures, on transportation equipment, on other machinery, on computer software, and so on. And we note that there is a good number of sectors in which doing so will have a negative effect on output. This is a good number of sectors, and we notice that whether you do it on dwellings or you do it on transport equipment, the sign is the same. There are a few cases where we cannot be very sure because we have the data is missing and not sufficient to carry the analysis. But in the cases that we do have information, we see this uniformity. Likewise, we have a good number of sectors where, irrespective of where we're investing, whether where we're using dwellings or transport equipment or other machinery, the sign is positive. So, in conclusion, we suggest there is some evidence that the effect of the second step associated with multi-factor productivity does not much alter the effect of the first step. That is, the marginal effect of each type of capital is inferior to the sign, to the effect produced when we from the overall capital of the sector. And if capital and other inputs are by and large expected to contribute to output in Greece in the same manner they contributed in the recent past, that is in 2018, a year where we had expansion, It might be better if efforts were made with an eye to draw investments in sectors where changes in the level of capital are associated with positive effects, and sell overseas capital or a portion of capital assets from sectors in which the marginal product of capital was negative, starting from the assets that feature the largest negative coefficient in each sector. Be careful, this is not to say to get rid of the whole sector, just sell some of the least efficient machinery or other forms of capital. Alternatively, organize the said assets in ways that they're used more efficiently compared to the past, educate the staff so as to operate the assets more efficiently. Add new technological improved and easier to use such assets. Assessing the impact on sectoral output that the various types of capital assets have or had until recently in Greece contributes to the discussion regarding the prospects of alternative economic development pathways. This has directed our thoughts to the cases in which conditions may be right for introduction of a new investment or a new production paradigms, because in many cases, the way we're operating is not efficient. To the extent that similar data are held by a good number of statistical institutes around the world, similar analysis can be carried out for many countries to highlight baseline prospects and inform policy. Thank you.